Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post. Woke Hollywood collapses as programming shifts to serve Trump's America. Good things are finally happening in Hollywood. From the Wall Street Journal, Hollywood pivots to programming for Trump's America. TV shows like Shifting Gears and Duck Dynasty resonate with flyover country, while fewer shows take on the president. And from the LA Times, Hollywood's DEI commitments were slipping even before Trump. Now they're vanishing fast. This is like a complete reversal. In a recent episode of the new ABC sitcom Shifting Gears, Tim Allen bemoans his grandson's school dropping its Minuteman mascot because the vice principal says it isn't inclusive. Quote, what's more inclusive than a dude wearing a wig, stockings, little high heels, holding onto a rifle? That could bring this country together. Checks every damn box, Allen says to his daughter, who lives in fear of every potentially politically incorrect utterance her father makes. Even the phrase politically incorrect in this article is something that was considered by the diversity people inappropriate to use. They banned that term, but I guess it's mainstream again. Such dialogue is the norm for Allen's character, a classic car restoration shop owner who listens to the Joe Rogan Experience. Since its debut in January, Shifting Gears has become a hit on Disney's ABC and Hulu, with episodes drawing an average of 10 million viewers, according to Nielsen. Whether it's a show featuring Tim Allen, who has made no secret of his admiration for the president, Bill Maher interviewing Trump backer Kid Rock on its HBO show Real Time, or A&E bringing back Duck Dynasty, Hollywood is serving some red meat to the red states. The embrace of right-leaning programming is a stark contrast to much of the past few decades in Hollywood. Producers have long used their shows to take aim at conservative politics. Aaron Sorkin's NBC drama The West Wing and HBO's The Newsroom often did this. More recently, the legal drama The Good Fight often made the first Trump administration a plot point. Now the entertainment industry is pulling back on diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts on the business side. Television agents and some executives say privately there's also been a chilling effect on any programming that could be perceived as woke. Furthermore, the president's legal battles with ABC News and CBS's 60 Minutes also present a threat to the industry. Bill Maher, who's always encouraged a range of voices, has of late made more of an effort to have guests supportive of the president. He said that ignoring Trump supporters or blindly hating them will drive people into their arms. As for recent guests such as Megyn Kelly and Representative Byron Donalds, Maher says, quote, I don't give them a free pass. In another side of the shift, the Disney animated show Win or Lose removed a transgender storyline during the presidential campaign. It was the second time in 18 months the company backed away from the subject. And in that same show, Disney added a Christian character, openly Christian character, and featured that character in the show. The complete opposite of what you would expect from Disney. Disney has also said the content changes recognize, quote, that many parents prefer to discuss certain subjects with their children on their own terms and timeline. Quote, there's a course correction when it comes to entertainment, said Dan Abrams, host and executive producer of On Patrol Live, a show that follows the police in action on Reels and Peacock. Abrams' show was a hit on A&E under its previous incarnation, Live PD, but it was canceled in the wake of George Floyd's death, an event that changed the national conversation about the police force and race, leading some networks to drop reality shows that were perceived as favorable towards law enforcement. Now there's a resurgence of such programming. Last year, the Nexstar-owned CW broadcast network launched Police 24/7, which it promotes as an adrenaline-packed series delivering raw, unfiltered access into the world of sheriffs and police departments. In January, A&E launched Ozark Law, which follows two police departments in the region. Greg Henry, co-president of Lucky 8 TV, the company behind Ozark Law, said, we're telling stories we hope resonate with folks in Missouri and trying to put a lens to the country and have them see themselves. Duck Dynasty, about the Louisiana-based Robertson family that operates a successful duck hunting business, is similarly getting another chance. The show was a hit in its first run from 2012 to 2017, often averaging more than 10 million people per episode. The show had a strong appeal to conservatives and Christians. Each episode typically ended with the family praying. Family member Corey Robertson said in an interview that the show does not have an agenda one way or the other, nor do they have any interest into getting into politics on the program. She attributes its popularity to being a fun and family-friendly show at a time when the world feels a bit scary. Behind the camera, media giants including Disney, Warner Brothers, Discovery, and Paramount have said they're scaling back on DEI initiatives. Last month, the Federal Communications Commission Chairman Brendan Carr asked the agency's Enforcement Bureau to investigate Comcast and its NBC Universal unit for promoting DEI in a manner that does not comply with FCC regulations. The FCC's Carr also sent a letter to the heads of Google and its YouTube TV last week, saying he wants to determine whether the latter is refusing to carry channels that offer faith-based programming. A spokesman for YouTube said it doesn't have any policies that prohibit religious content. Eric Schultz, a former Obama administration official who's consulted on shows including Succession and Netflix's new limited series, 0 Day, says the election was a shock to Hollywood executives who are trying to figure out a response to President Trump. Quote, that is competing with an instinct to keep your head down and stay out of trouble, Schultz said. Because trying to abuse your company's power, whether it's an entertainment company or a consumer products company like Anheuser-Busch, and use that power to try to push a political agenda is clearly not working and only damages the company. And the new administration is not afraid of using the Justice Department to call companies out when they play these kinds of destructive antisocial games. Most of the shows launched recently began development during Trump's campaign as his popularity surged. That Hollywood has embraced so much of this programming so quickly is an acknowledgement that there's an underserved audience in what executives often derisively refer to as flyover country. Well, there's been a bit of a wake-up call, not just in Trump being elected, but in the lead-up as well, Abrams said. And as if Trump didn't have enough exposure, from Variety, Donald Trump's The Apprentice seasons 1 to 7 will stream on Amazon Prime Video. They haven't been streaming since 2019 when Tubi had the show. And from the Los Angeles Times, Hollywood's DEI commitments were slipping even before Trump. Now they're vanishing fast. In 2020, studios and entertainment companies pledged millions of dollars to civil rights organizations, vowed to establish pipelines for diverse talent, and instituted new requirements for inclusive hiring. But over the last few weeks, media companies have retreated from those promises. The retrenchment on diversity was happening even before President Trump took office, according to experts. Walt Disney is changing some of its internal DEI policies, including swapping out a diversity and inclusion performance standard used to calculate executive compensation. Meanwhile, Warner Brothers told employees that its DEI program would now just be called inclusion, and Paramount Global dropped staffing goals related to gender, race, ethnicity, and sex, which are illegal quotas. There was no way they'd be able to continue doing anything like that. Any of the companies doing that right now are going to be under the microscope at the Department of Justice. The moves came shortly after the Trump administration issued an executive order targeting DEI programs in the private sector. Trump called on the U.S. Attorney General to identify up to 9 potential civil compliance investigations of publicly traded companies, large nonprofits, or foundations with at least $500 million in assets, big enough to make an example out of them. Executives often talk about how important diversity is for business, but the industry's progress on inclusivity has come in fits and starts. Many in Hollywood have said diversity programs were not a perfect solution and should not have been viewed as the end-all be-all of the industry's problems. But now that these goals are fading into the background or being eliminated altogether, some are concerned about how to ensure progress continues. Well, by people getting merit and then they can succeed on their own ability. How about that crazy idea? That's what's going to happen whether they like it or not. It's coming at them like a freight train. In the meantime, audiences still want diverse stories and will show up to authentic movies that they feel represent them, according to Jeremiah Abraham. That's this guy, chief executive of multicultural marketing and communications firm Tremendous. Quote, we've seen people vote with buying tickets and voting with how many times they've seen films, he said. But without these systemic DEI efforts, the path of getting those stories will probably be harder. Of course, it won't be harder if the stories are actually good, because people will make them because they'll be able to make money from them. Back to the old capitalist system. Financial losses from the pandemic, the dual writers and actor strikes in 2023, and overspending during the so-called streaming wars meant that companies were already looking for ways to cut costs. Quote, when the industry contracts, diversity is the first thing to go because it's not seen as essential, said Anna Cristina Ramon, director of the Entertainment and Media Research Initiative at UCLA. The return to the status quo can easily happen in a situation where there's a disruption to the industry. Because all of this was subsidized garbage like amateurish nonsense that never should have been produced? Yes, Adam, that's correct. There have often been pullbacks in diversity programs, said Karen Horde, a former executive at Warner Brothers who oversaw DEI efforts. Quote, this is a pendulum that has swung back and forth, she said. A lot of companies are still doing the work. They're just not being as loud about it. They're just doing it quietly. Media companies have also been under pressure from conservative groups because of diverse or inclusive content that they call woke. Disney sparred with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis after the company raised objections to anti-LGBT state legislation. And that was one of the most crazy situations I ever saw. People were so delusional at Disney that they thought they could take on the state of Florida and somehow win. The state of Florida is like a big thing. It's an actual sovereign state. It has power. It represents the people. Being a big company is one thing, but it's not like an actual government. So of course Disney lost its land that it controlled in its special taxing district, which gave it all kinds of financial advantages and the advantages to be able to plan things they wanted to do in Florida. They had control. It's a very unusual thing. Some other companies have that kind of situation as well. But when they started messing around with the state of Florida that was just trying to protect children, the state of Florida had to publicly crush them, and they did. They took the rights away for Disney to operate its own special tax district. Over the last 2 years, the entertainment industry has shed thousands of jobs. During that same time, there's also been a decrease in the number of US-based positions at Hollywood studios that explicitly mention DEI concepts in their job titles, according to an analyst by workforce data firm Resurgence Labs. The reduction of DEI roles in the industry at large outpaced the general decrease in employment, Resurgence Labs found by charting jobs at Paramount Pictures, Sony Pictures Entertainment, Walt Disney Studios, Warner Brothers, Universal Studios, and Amazon Studios. That trend extended to the highest ranks of DEI positions. In 2023, high-profile exits of several media companies' diversity chiefs renewed doubts about Hollywood's commitment to these ideals and whether these positions were ever structured in a way to produce real change. No, they weren't, because there was no way you were going to just hire someone and say, look, your job is to make sure that we make unproductive garbage that people don't actually want to see, except for the very rare exception where people do like whatever it is you produce, but 95% of it was a money loser. No, there was no way you were going to hire someone that was going to try to dictate a political agenda on top of commercial products. It's not something you can do. People only buy what they want to buy. Well, particularly in 2020, jobs were hired, but there wasn't any clarity or success measures given to these leaders, said Janelle English, founder and chief executive of consulting firm Elizabeth and former executive vice president of impact and inclusion at the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. Quote, there's an opportunity for individuals in these roles, but it requires a true, honest conversation about what that role means in an organization today and what success looks like for them. And anyone competent taking a job at an executive level understands that completely. They understand when you take the job, you need to ask your boss, like, what are my measurements here? Like, how are you evaluating me? How do I know I'm doing a good job and that what I'm doing is productive? You don't take the job without having answers to that question if you're a serious person. So after all the damage started getting done by pushing too much diversity in Hollywood, and it started to become obvious at the studios and they had financial pressures, they could no longer afford to subsidize this amateurish garbage anymore. And they had to go back producing the way they always produce based on what people would actually want at a professional level. Sean Harper, founder and chief research scientist at the USC Race and Equity Center, remembers the summer of 2020 when his phone was ringing off the hook with questions from executives in the aftermath of George Floyd's death. In the last 2 or 3 years, he's gotten fewer calls. Quote, what we're seeing in Hollywood is a sign of the times, said Harper, who has worked with and advised studios and entertainment companies on DEI programs. Quote, it disappoints me for sure, but it doesn't surprise me. Doesn't surprise me either. As studios sunset certain initiatives, some fear that the already slim opportunities for people of color could decrease, compounded by the ongoing production slowdown in Los Angeles due to industry contraction and runaway production. Runaway production is when we produce things outside of Los Angeles, essentially, in another state, in another country, because of tax advantages. And that's happening no matter what they do with diversity and even the wildfires. That doesn't help. But it's just too costly to produce in Los Angeles in almost every case. When you compare it to another area you could produce in, and it's like, what, 20, 30, 40% less on a multi-million-dollar production? Why would you not do that? Of course you would. Having less opportunities for diversity-based projects could lead to people leaving the business or perhaps going to new platforms for distribution, including social media. And if you can make what you're doing on social media and make it financially viable and create your own content, no matter what it is, that's fantastic. And people do that. But it is merit-based because you've got to get the audience on social media. Well, being a filmmaker, you're trying to impress Hollywood, said Maris Ladaka, founder of the Blended Future Project, a media company that focuses on multiracial stories. Well, but maybe this is the wake-up call we need, that we can't keep trying to impress them anymore. The goalposts keep changing. Trying to impress Hollywood is the same thing as trying to impress anyone. You're trying to show them what you can do for them. In family, people just love you for who you are. When you have close friends, they love you for who you are. Outside of family and friends, when you're in a professional environment, you can't just show up based on your skin color or your gender or your sexual preference. You have to show up with something that has commercial value or extreme artistic value, not just because you like it, not just because mom likes it, because what you've produced is inherently amazing, compelling, fascinating. Doesn't matter what you look like. Doesn't matter what your race is or gender. If you have something that's really commercially viable or something that's inherently just great, you're going to do just fine. If you don't have that, you better build a network. You better understand what it is that people are buying and people are interested in and what's doing well and what's not doing well. Watch the trends. Do the work. Because just putting your hand out and saying, hey, I'm diverse, just don't work anymore. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another story. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.